So on Wednesday, December 3rd, Trent Horn posted a video on his Council of Trent YouTube channel, uh, which is, I think, an interesting video. I was also disturbed by it, to be honest. And in the video, he talks about the use of language, savages, using the term savages and barbarians to refer to people with particular cultural practices. So he begins the video by saying it's not politically correct to call particular groups of people savages, but I'm more concerned with being correct than with being politically correct. And then he goes on and he talks about how there are various groups, cultures, societies that have practices that we would consider to be savage. And so it is right to refer to those as savage and to refer to those groups as savages and barbarians or barbarous. And he gives examples. So the practice of Chinese foot binding, the practice of widow burning in India, and this one, the practice of human sacrifice in ancient Aztec society. And so Trent is pushing back here on people who have censured the use of this kind of language and sort of suggesting they are often uh, exhibiting a moral relativism, saying that we can't judge other cultures, but he says we are not moral relativists as Christians. We should judge other cultures, and we should be free to condemn their actions at points as savage and thus refer to them as savages. Okay, so he also says, but those judgments shouldn't ever be based on racial grounds or prejudicial grounds, but rather on the extent to which these individuals and their cultural practices fail to align with the life and teaching of Jesus, and that would warrant calling them savages. And I produced a video in response to Trent, and in my video, I pointed out that by that standard, he should call ancient Israelites barbarians and savages. And so here's a question. Are you okay with calling the ancient Israelites savages and barbarians? And if not, then maybe you should rethink. This is the implication of the video. Maybe you should rethink the baptizing of that kind of rhetoric. So that was the gist of my video. Um, and now I'm going to say some things. We're going to take a look at Trent's response to my video, and then I'm going to offer a response to that. But I want to first of all preface this by saying I've known Trent for several years. I would consider him a friend. In 2019, he very generously flew me down to San Diego to be on Catholic Answers, so we had a great time. And yeah, I offer these comments as a friend. But first of all, let's take a look at what he said in response. So first of all, he said, "I agree that ancient Israel was savage in many ways, though less so than other cultures." Okay, let's just pause there. So it follows then that, and I gave multiple examples, like the practices of slaughtering infants and slaughtering civilians and seizing, kidnapping virgin girls for armies, for the Israelite army, and amputating hands, punitively amputating a woman's hands, and stoning people to death, and potentially stoning rape victims to death. And I said, these are all by this standard, obviously barbarous and savage. So, really, what Trent has to accept here is if he begins his video by saying it is morally right to call entire groups and cultures savages and savage and barbarous because you want to reject moral relativism, well, then you should bite the bullet and explicitly call ancient Israel savage and barbarous. I think he's equivocating here. He says, well, they were savage in many ways. The video, again, I see it, I interpret it as justifying the rhetorical framing of entire groups, cultures, people, societies as savage and barbarous. And so my point follows, it remains, and I don't think he's responded to that, that by that standard, if you do want to use that language of the Aztecs or the Indians or the Chinese, then you should use that language of the ancient Israelites. Personally, I think you ought to just repudiate that language. he may he may Trent may be dismissive of this as being politically correct, that we would avoid using the language of savagery and barbarism to label entire groups. But I think it's not indicative of moral relativism that I say we ought not call the Aztecs and the Chinese and the Indians and the ancient Israelites savages. I think that is a recognition that every society is a mixture of wheat and tares, good and evil, but labeling entire groups and societies savages and barbarous and barbarians blinds us to the good in those cultures, to the wheat, and leads us to think in very binary terms, that we just kind of reject them and oppress them and completely override their culture rather than see where we can learn from it. So it's not moral relativism that leads me to reject the language Trent is defending. It's the fact that such language is itself harmful. And ironically, not only do I think Trent doesn't seem to appreciate the degree to which there is quote unquote savagery in ancient Israel, the interesting thing is, I think he's not appreciating the degree to which it is in his very midst in modern contemporary America. Okay, he also says, I'm not going to, well, he says, I agree with Dan McClellan that numbers five, now I cited numbers five as an example of where it would warrant abortion. He says, well, this is not about abortion in his view, it's about a curse to an alleged adulteress with infertility. And I'm just going to say here as an aside, I don't think this makes things better. So this is the trial of the bitter waters. What Trent is saying here is that numbers five, essentially, if a husband suspects his wife of infidelity, he can make her infertile as a response. He can sterilize her. Well, if you do want to talk about barbarism and savagery, imagine a jealous husband who now has warrant, according to numbers five, to sterilize his wife. I mean, that is evil. Again, another example of barbarism and savagery by Trent's measure. But here's what I really wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about Donald Trump's use of the language of savagery, the language of barbarism, the language of dehumanization and objectification. And these are just some examples from the last several years that have spewed out of the mouth of Donald Trump. He refers to migrants and refugees, people from outside the country, all of whom, for Donald Trump, are always non-Caucasian. He refers to them as savage, illegal alien criminals who have been raping, pillaging, killing our cities and our towns. He refers to them as stone cold killers who walk into your kitchen. They'll cut your throat. These are not human, vile animals, monsters. And remember this one from October of 2024? He says they're eating the dogs, the people they came in, they're eating the cats, they're eating the pets of the people that live there. Now, that, of course, is a reference to Haitians. And he is here framing Haitians as savages, as barbarous. And he's using a very old racist trope that savages from other countries, they eat things that it is obviously savage to eat, like pets. And I talked about this last year when this happened, and he and JD Vance spewed this lie about Haitians. It is a lie that they are eating the pets of the people in the city of Ohio where they were living. But I noted that when I was a kid in the 1970s and 80s, there were these racist stories that if you went to a Chinese restaurant, you'd get cat meat or dog meat. And that is the same thing. It's the same othering of outgroups as savages. He says we've got a lot of bad genes in our country right now. He says just recently, in the last 2 weeks, only reverse migration can fully cure the situation. And he said end migration from all third world countries. Now, third world country is not a category in geopolitics, and certainly not anymore, not with the fall of the Soviet Union. But what it is a catch-all term for non-Caucasian developing countries. That's what this is. He says they can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in. I mean, how could you be more contemptful or contemptuous of outsiders than saying they don't even know what country they're in. He says, so we have hundreds of thousands of people flowing in from Haiti. Haiti has a tremendous AIDS problem. Many of those people will probably have AIDS, and they're coming into our country, and we don't know anything about it. So we have a death wish, he says, for our country. Savages from Haiti flooding into the country with AIDS, infecting the country. He says, I think the real number, 15, 16 million people into our country, when they do that, they've got a lot of work to do. They're poisoning the blood of our country. And that was, I believe, December of 2023. He said that people from outside the country, savages, are poisoning the blood of our country. He says they don't care about crime and they want illegal immigrants, no matter how bad they are, to pour in and infest our country like MS-13. So infestation. This is of this is like black mold, right? Or cockroaches, something infesting your country, rats. The Democrats say, please don't call them animals. They're humans. I say, no, they're not humans. They're not humans. They're animals. And of course, he'll often hear say, oh, I'm actually not talking about all migrants. I'm talking about just the criminal element. And yet he seamlessly goes back and forth, and he has always done so, between the quote unquote criminal element and the collective group. Of course, he did this back in June of 2016 or 2015, sorry, when he launched his campaign and referred to Mexicans as rapists and murderers. And then he says, and some, I assume, are good people, as if recognizing that not all Mexicans are rapists and murderers was somehow a benevolent concession on his part. He says, at this very moment, large, well organized caravans of migrants are marching toward our southern border. Some people call it an invasion. These are tough people in many cases. A lot of young men, strong men, and a lot of men that maybe we don't want in our country. This isn't an innocent group of people. It's a large number of people that are tough. They have injured, they have attacked. Now, he was talking here, this is 2018, during the midterm elections, when he was trying to get people to vote Republican in the midterms. And he was stoking fear at the time of invasions of Latin American caravans. Now, these quote unquote caravans, which Fox News talked incessantly about at the time, were for the most part migrant families, children, women, people seeking a better life, seeking to escape from often places where there was high crime rates, where their lives were at risk. And Trump frames them all as caravans of strong men invading the country. At the time as well, there is an association between these migrant caravans and leprosy. And on Fox News at the time, there were these constant drumbeat talks about maybe these people were bringing leprosy into the country. They're rough people, in many cases from jails, prisons, mental asylums, insane asylums, or mental institutions, insane asylums. You know, insane asylums, that's Silence of the Lambs stuff. Hannibal Lecter. Anybody know Hannibal Lecter? They're coming in from China, 31, 32,000 over the last few months, and they're all military age, and they're mostly all men. And it sounds to me they're trying to build a little army in our country. This is a picture incessantly over the last 10 years. He has stoked fear, hatred, xenophobia, contempt for quote unquote savages and barbarians who are invading the country with disease and with subcultural evil practices. And we need to get them out, have reverse migration, protect the blood of our country, protect our genes. Now, I pointed out that Trent's video came out on December 3rd because on December 2nd, this is what Trump said about the Somalian community in Michigan. He said these people, the entire group of Somalians living in America, and keep in mind, some of these people are immigrants from Somalia. Some of them are were born in America and are part of the Somalian community, but they actually are themselves born in America. They're as American as anybody. But Trump referred to this entire group of people as garbage. He said they contribute nothing to America. He said, quote, their country stinks. So implying even people who are Somalian who were born in America, really, they don't belong here. They're not of us. They belong to this country, which of course he referred in 2018 to all African countries as shitholes, at the same time that he referred to Haiti as a shithole. He said their country stinks. They just run around killing each other. Savages, barbarians. We don't want them in our country. He wants all Somalians living in America to go back to Somalia and get out of America because we need to protect the integrity of our country. And I pointed out that this came on December 2nd because it was a day before Trent's video came out. So Trent on December 3rd posts a video talking, defending calling groups savages and barbarians. Trent does say that we should reject racism, but the only reference to the Trump administration and to JD Vance in particular is a clip from JD Vance that Trent praises, where he condemns child sacrifice in Latin American cultures. But he says nothing about the Trump administration and the entire MAGA movement that is based on viewing out groups, non-Caucasian groups, vulnerable migrants and immigrants, and people from the quote unquote third world as garbage, as savages, as barbarians, as non-humans, as poisoning the blood of the country. What I think most of Trent's viewers, certainly the MAGA viewers of Trent Horn, are going to see in his video is simply the baptism of the rhetoric of savagery and barbarism for outgroups, which aligns perfectly with the utterly morally corrupt Trump administration. And for that reason, I'm sad to say that I think Trent and his video utterly failed to meet the moment.